The empty synthol bottle slipped from Marcus Vale's fingers, clattering across the scratched metal floor of his quarters on Arcturus Station. The holographic news display flickered in the dim light, casting shifting blue shadows across his stubbled face as another report droned about, maintaining order in the outer sectors. He reached for the bottle with unsteady hands, but it had rolled too far from his position on the worn couch. At 28, Marcus felt ancient. 3 years as a low-level security guard on one of the galaxy's most forgettable transit stations had drained whatever optimism he'd once possessed. His small apartment reflected his state of mind, sparse, functional, and utterly devoid of warmth. The only decoration was a faded photograph of his parents, long dead in a transport accident that had left him alone in the universe. Display entertainment channels, he mumbled to the room's basic AI system. The news vanished, replaced by a garish reality show featuring various alien species competing in absurd romantic challenges. The artificial drama made his head pound, but at least it didn't remind him of his own failures. A sharp knock echoed through the room, causing Marcus to freeze mid-reach for another bottle. Nobody ever visited him. His shift supervisor communicated through digital messages, and he had no friends among his fellow guards. The sound came again, more insistent this time, accompanied by the metallic groan of his door being tested. Something stirred deep in Marcus's mind, an alertness he hadn't felt in years. His heart began to beat with steady, controlled rhythm rather than the elevated panic he expected. The synthol fog in his brain seemed to clear as his body tensed with unfamiliar readiness. "Vale, open this door," a gravelly voice commanded from the corridor. "We know you're home." Marcus moved silently to the door panel, pressing himself against the wall beside it rather than standing directly in front. The positioning felt natural, though he couldn't remember learning such caution. "Who's asking?" he called out, deliberately slurring his words to sound more intoxicated than he felt. "Station maintenance. Routine inspection of environmental systems." The explanation rang false immediately. Maintenance schedules were posted weeks in advance, and inspections never happened during night shift. Marcus's pulse remained steady, but every muscle in his body coiled with anticipation. "I didn't get any notification through my comm unit." The response was a brilliant flash of cutting energy that carved through his door lock like it was made of paper. 3 figures pushed through the opening, large humanoids wearing combat armor marked with the distinctive spiral tattoos of Corvan mercenaries. Their leader raised a neural disruptor, its barrel gleaming with lethal intent. "Wrong answer, Vale," the leader snarled. Something extraordinary happened in that moment. Marcus felt his consciousness divide, as if he were watching himself from outside his own body. The terrified, confused part of his mind screamed in panic, but another presence, ancient, trained, deadly, seized control of his physical form. Moving with fluid precision he'd never possessed, Marcus hurled his empty bottle with perfect accuracy. It struck the leader's neck, shattering against a cybernetic implant and sending electrical feedback crackling across the mercenary's armor. The Corvan howled and staggered backward. Without conscious thought, Marcus dropped into a combat crouch and launched himself at the second attacker. His uppercut connected with inhuman accuracy, the impact reverberating through his arm as alien cartilage crunched. The mercenary collapsed, neural disruptor clattering across the floor. "What the hell is happening to me?" The thought flashed through Marcus's mind even as his body continued moving with deadly efficiency. The third Corvan lunged with a vibroblade, but Marcus sidestepped the attack, caught his assailant's wrist, and used the alien's own momentum to slam him into the wall hard enough to dent the metal plating. "Who sent you?" Marcus demanded, surprised by the authoritative edge in his voice. He twisted the Corvan's arm, applying pressure with surgical precision. The wounded mercenary spat green blood. "The Syndicate always collects its debts, even from ghosts like you." "I don't owe anyone anything," Marcus replied, tightening his grip. "Your service record says different, officer." The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. For an instant, fractured images flashed through his mind, a starship bridge, fellow crew members, the weight of insignia on his uniform, but they vanished before he could grasp their meaning. The momentary distraction cost him. The leader had recovered enough to fire his disruptor. Marcus dove aside, but the energy field clipped his shoulder, sending numbing paralysis down his left arm. "Time to go," he muttered, kicking the second Corvin into the path of another disruptor blast and sprinting from his ruined quarters. The corridors of Arcturus Station's residential sector became a maze of opportunity and danger as Marcus ran. His legs carried him with a runner's endurance he'd never known he possessed, while his mind processed tactical information with startling clarity. Emergency alarms blared as the station's security system detected weapons discharge, but Marcus instinctively avoided the main thoroughfares where guards would respond first. He ducked into maintenance passages, somehow knowing exactly where the surveillance cameras were positioned. How did he possess such knowledge? The question burned in his thoughts as his body navigated the station's layout like he'd memorized every corridor and junction. The Corvin mercenaries' heavy footsteps echoed behind him, growing closer despite his head start. Marcus squeezed into a service tunnel barely wide enough for his shoulders, the passage angling downward into the oldest sections of the station. These areas saw little traffic beyond automated maintenance drones, making them perfect for someone who needed to disappear. After what felt like hours of crawling through cramped passages, Marcus emerged into a section he'd never seen before despite 3 years on the station. Warning symbols covered sealed bulkheads, and everything bore the neglected appearance of abandonment. A faded sign in multiple languages read, "Restricted area, detention level, authorized personnel only." The door should have been locked, secured by multiple encryption protocols, but it slid open at his approach as if it had been waiting for him. Marcus hesitated at the threshold, every instinct screaming that he was walking into a trap, but the sound of approaching footsteps made the decision for him. The chamber beyond was circular, illuminated by harsh white lighting that cast no shadows. In the center stood a translucent containment cell, and within it, a figure that made Marcus forget how to breathe. She was unlike any being he'd ever encountered. Her skin possessed a deep silver-blue luminescence that seemed to shift with her breathing, and her features combined alien grace with an undeniably feminine beauty. Long hair the color of starlight fell across her shoulders, but it was her eyes that captivated him completely, violet orbs with vertical pupils that widened as she noticed his presence. She wore only a simple shift that barely preserved her modesty, and energy restraints around her wrists pulsed with malevolent yellow light. When she spoke, her voice carried a musical quality that resonated in his bones. "Come to stare at the captive, human." Despite her defiant words, Marcus detected exhaustion and pain in her tone. Before he could respond, the chamber's entrance sealed with a heavy clank. A dozen figures in Galactic Authority uniforms emerged from concealed doorways, their weapons trained on both Marcus and the imprisoned woman. "Prisoner transfer interrupted," announced their leader, a severe woman with cybernetic implants visible at her temples. "Step away from the containment unit, civilian." "There's been some mistake," Marcus began, raising his hands slowly. "I was just..." Silence. The officer's voice cut through his explanation like a blade. "Zara Nethys, you are scheduled for extraction. Your telepathic abilities will be harvested for military application." The woman, Zara, rose to her feet with surprising dignity despite her restraints. "I have committed no crime except being born with gifts your masters desire. My people have honored every treaty, paid every tribute demanded of us." The officer's expression remained cold. "Your entire species exists at the authorities' discretion. Genetic anomalies do not possess rights." Something primal and protective erupted within Marcus at those words. A wave of fury unlike anything he'd ever experienced washed through him, accompanied by a burning sensation in his chest. Energy he couldn't name or understand flowed through his veins, collecting in his fingertips with electric intensity. "She's not property," Marcus growled, his voice deeper and more resonant than normal. "None of us are." The guards laughed at his declaration, but their amusement died when they noticed the golden radiance beginning to emanate from Marcus's hands. Even Zara's violet eyes widened in shock and recognition. "Impossible," the officer whispered. "He's manifesting." Marcus didn't understand what was happening to his body, but he knew with absolute certainty that he would not allow these people to harm Zara. As the first guard raised his weapon, Marcus instinctively thrust his hand forward. A blast of golden energy erupted from his palm, forming a shimmering barrier that absorbed the weapon's discharge harmlessly. The chamber erupted into chaos as all the guards opened fire simultaneously. Moving with superhuman reflexes, Marcus dodged and weaved between energy bolts, his body accessing combat training his conscious mind had never received. He reached the containment cell's control panel just as Zara's voice echoed in his thoughts, not heard, but felt directly in his consciousness. "Free me, Marcus Vale, and together we can escape this place." The sound of his name in her mental voice sent shivers through his entire being. As his fingers found the release mechanism, Marcus realized his life had just changed forever. Whatever he had been before this moment was gone. What he would become remained to be written among the stars. The golden light emanating from the human's hands felt like sunrise on Vexra, warm, protective, and infinitely precious. Zara Nethys pressed herself against the far wall of her containment cell, not from fear of Marcus Vale, but from the overwhelming sensation of hope that his presence ignited within her telepathic consciousness. For the first time in 8 months of captivity, she wasn't alone with her thoughts. "Marcus," she whispered into his mind, testing the connection that had sparked between them the moment their eyes met. "Release the cell's power coupling." Third panel from the left. She watched him navigate the control system with surprising intuition, his fingers finding the correct sequence as if guided by instinct. The energy restraints around her wrists flickered and died, and the translucent barrier began to dissolve. But Zara's moment of freedom was interrupted by a searing pain that tore through her skull. The extraction apparatus hidden within her cell had activated automatically, designed to harvest her telepathic abilities even as she escaped. She collapsed to her knees, silver blue hands clutching her temples as the machine began to drain the very essence of what made her unique. "No." The anguish in her mental voice reached Marcus with the force of a physical blow. Through their connection, he felt her pain as his own, the sensation of having pieces of his soul torn away by invisible claws. "What's happening to her?" Marcus shouted at the guards, his golden energy shield flickering with his emotional distress. The officer smiled coldly. "Emergency extraction protocol. Even if you somehow free her, she'll be an empty shell within minutes." Rage and desperation flooded through Marcus, and Zara felt his protective instincts amplify through their bond. But beneath his fury, she sensed something else, a deep well of loneliness that matched her own. This human had been as isolated as she, trapped in his own kind of prison. Drawing on strength she didn't know she still possessed, Zara reached out telepathically and found the source of Marcus's newfound abilities. What she discovered made her gasp with wonder. "You're not human," she whispered into his consciousness. "Not entirely." Images flowed between them, memories Zara pulled from the deepest recesses of Marcus's suppressed past. A starship called the Meridian Dawn. A uniform bearing the insignia of the Terran Exploration Corps. And most importantly, a medical bay where a young officer had undergone experimental genetic therapy after exposure to exotic radiation. "They made you forget," Zara realized, her mental voice heavy with shared sorrow. "Someone wanted you to believe you were ordinary." The revelation sent shockwaves through Marcus's energy field. His golden barrier expanded, encompassing Zara's cell and disrupting the extraction machinery. Sparks flew from the control panels as his power surged beyond anything the guards had anticipated. "Impossible readings," one of the technicians shouted. "His energy output is off the scale." Zara felt the connection between them deepen as Marcus's true nature awakened. Through their bond, she experienced his memories as they returned in a flood, years of service aboard exploration vessels, first contact with dozens of alien species, and a love for the stars that had been buried beneath layers of artificial amnesia. "They took your memories because you questioned the authorities' treatment of enhanced beings," she whispered. "You were going to expose their experiments." Marcus's eyes met hers through the dissolving barrier, and Zara saw recognition dawn in their depths. But more than that, she saw something that made her heart race despite their desperate circumstances. He was looking at her not as an alien specimen or a telepathic weapon, but as a woman he would die to protect. The guards opened fire again, but Marcus's shield held firm. In the brief respite, Zara shared her own story through their mental link, images of Vexera, her homeworld, where her people had lived in harmony for millennia. She showed him the terraced crystal cities that sang with telepathic resonance, the gardens where emotions bloomed as visible light, and the sacred pools where Vexarian children first learned to touch other minds with gentleness. We were artists, philosophers, healers, she explained as their connection grew stronger. Our gifts were meant to bring understanding between beings, not to be harvested for war. Through her memories, Marcus experienced the day the galactic authority ships arrived at Vexera. They had come under the pretense of establishing trade relations, but Zara's people's telepathic abilities made them immediately aware of the humans' true intentions. The routine health screenings were actually genetic mapping sessions. The cultural exchange programs were cover for identifying the most powerful telepaths. Zara had been selected not just for her abilities, but for her bloodline. Her grandmother had been one of the first Vexarians to make peaceful contact with humans decades earlier, and that diplomatic connection had marked her family for special attention from the authorities' researchers. They told my parents I was chosen for an honor, to serve as an ambassador. Zara's mental voice carried bitter irony. Instead, they brought me here to be slowly drained until nothing remained. The extraction machine sparked and died as Marcus's power overloaded its circuits. Zara felt the horrible draining sensation cease, and her natural telepathic abilities began to return like blood flowing back into a numb limb. But with that return came a deeper awareness of Marcus's emotional state. Beneath his protective fury, she sensed a profound loneliness that mirrored her own. He had been as much a prisoner as she, confined not by energy bars, but by false memories and a fabricated identity designed to keep him compliant and isolated. "We're both exiles," she whispered into his mind. "But perhaps that means we can find home in each other." The sentiment passed between them with the force of a vow, sealing their connection in ways that transcended mere telepathy. Zara felt her consciousness intertwine with his, creating a bond that would be impossible to break. "The extraction field is down," shouted one of the technicians. "She's regaining full telepathic capacity." The officer's face hardened. "Then we terminate both subjects and salvage what genetic material we can." Marcus's shield flared brighter as he heard the death sentence. Through their link, Zara felt his determination crystallize into something unbreakable. He would not let her die in this sterile chamber, far from the singing crystals of her homeworld. "There's a service tunnel behind the main power coupling," Zara informed him, her recovered telepathic senses mapping the chamber's hidden passages. "I can feel the air currents. It leads to the docking bays." But even as she shared this information, Zara sensed something else through their connection, Marcus's growing awareness of the choice before them. They could run, hide, try to escape, but the authority would never stop hunting them. Her people on Vexera would continue to suffer. Other enhanced beings throughout the galaxy would keep disappearing into facilities like this one. "Or we can fight," she whispered, her mental voice carrying steel beneath its musical tones. "My people have a saying, when harmony is broken, sometimes discord is the only path back to song." Through their bond, she felt Marcus's resolve align with her own. They were no longer just two individuals trying to escape, they were the beginning of something larger. Her telepathic gifts and his protective abilities could be combined, amplified, turned against the very system that had tried to destroy them. The guards advanced, weapons charging for a final volley. But as they opened fire, something unprecedented happened. Zara's telepathic field merged with Marcus's energy shield, creating a barrier that not only deflected the weapon's discharge but reflected it back at the attackers with doubled intensity. "Run," Marcus said aloud, his voice carrying the authority of his forgotten rank. But Zara heard the deeper message through their mental connection, together. They moved as one being toward the hidden tunnel, their combined abilities clearing a path through smoke and sparks. As they disappeared into the darkness of the service passages, Zara felt a profound shift in her understanding of destiny. She had spent months as a victim, a resource to be exploited. But touching Marcus's mind had reminded her of something her grandmother had told her long ago: true power isn't in what you can take from others, child. It's in what you choose to give, and to whom. Looking back at the human who had risked everything to free her, Zara made her choice. Whatever came next, they would face it together, two broken souls who had found healing in each other's strength. The singing crystals of Vexera had taught her people that the most beautiful harmonies came from voices that complemented rather than competed. As she and Marcus navigated the tunnels toward an uncertain future, Zara began to understand that she had found her perfect harmony in the most unexpected place, in the heart of a human who had forgotten how to be human, but remembered how to love. The proximity alarms screaming through the cockpit of the Stellar Wind couldn't drown out the memory of Damon Cross's last conversation with the Galactic Authority. 3 years ago, when he'd still worn their uniform and believed their propaganda about maintaining order in the galaxy. Before he'd discovered what they really did to the anomalous beings they collected. "Damon, we're receiving a distress signal," announced Seraphina, her synthetic voice carrying a musical quality that never failed to make his heart skip. The android's holographic form materialized beside his pilot's chair, her silver hair catching the light from the instrument panels. "It's encoded with one of our old frequency signatures." Damon's weathered hands paused over the navigation controls. At 41, he'd seen enough of the galaxy's darkness to know that answering distress calls usually led to trouble. But something in Seraphina's expression, the way her programmed features could still surprise him with their capacity for concern, made him reconsider. "Location?" he asked, already knowing he would investigate regardless of the danger. "Arcturus Station, detention level. The signal is unusual. There appear to be two different neural patterns broadcasting simultaneously." That got Damon's attention. In his years of running covert extraction missions for enhanced beings fleeing authority persecution, he'd never encountered a dual-source distress call. His modified freighter, disguised as a common cargo hauler, had pulled dozens of telepaths, empaths, and other genetic anomalies from authority facilities. Each rescue had been dangerous, but none had involved two individuals broadcasting together. "Set course for Arcturus Station." "Full stealth protocols," Damon ordered, his fingers dancing across the control systems with practiced efficiency. "And Sarah? Run a deep scan on that signal. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." Seraphina's form flickered slightly as she diverted processing power to the analysis. Damon found himself watching her with the same fascination that had grown over their 2 years together. She'd been assigned to his ship during his authority days as a standard navigation AI, but upgrades to her matrix had given her something approaching true consciousness. Whether that consciousness included the capacity for love remained in question that tormented him daily. "Analysis complete," she announced, her silver eyes meeting his with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. "One human male, enhanced with energy manipulation abilities. One Vexerian female, telepathic class 9. Their neural patterns are intertwined in a way I've never seen before. Bonded?" Damon had heard rumors of such connections between enhanced beings, though he'd never witnessed one personally. "More than bonded. Their consciousness streams are partially merged. It's beautiful, Damon. Like watching two separate melodies become a single song." The wistfulness in Seraphina's voice made Damon's chest tighten. He'd been falling in love with an artificial being for months, and moments like this reminded him how real her emotions seemed, regardless of their synthetic origin. The Stellar Wind dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Arcturus Station's sensor perimeter. Damon's ship might look like a rust bucket from the outside, but beneath her worn hull lay some of the most sophisticated stealth technology he'd been able to acquire through less-than-legal channels. "Station security is on high alert," Seraphina reported, her form leaning over his shoulder in a way that made him acutely aware of her phantom warmth. "Multiple weapon discharges detected in the detention levels. Authority reinforcements are en route." "How long until they arrive?" 18 minutes. Damon's jaw tightened. Extraction missions required precision timing, and 18 minutes wasn't much margin for error. But something about the dual distress signal compelled him forward. Maybe it was the romantic in him, the part that hoped two beings could find in each other what he'd been searching for his entire life. Take us in through the maintenance docks. Prep the emergency teleportation system. As the stellar wind goes through Arcturus Station's outer defenses, Damon found himself thinking about the path that had led him here. Born on a frontier colony, he'd joined the Authority believing he was serving a noble cause. The truth had shattered that illusion. Authority facilities weren't protecting the galaxy from dangerous enhanced beings, they were harvesting them like crops. The breaking point had come during a raid on a peaceful empathic commune. Damon had watched Authority soldiers separate children from their parents, justifying the action as genetic resource allocation. That night, he'd stolen classified files detailing the scope of the harvesting program, transmitted them to underground networks, and deserted with his ship. "I'm detecting 2 life signs in Detention Cell 7, Serafina announced. "But Damon, there are 20 Authority personnel converging on their position. This extraction is going to be significantly more dangerous than usual." Damon's hands moved across the weapon controls, charging the stellar wind's hidden armaments. "Since when has danger stopped us?" Serafina's holographic form smiled, and Damon felt that familiar flutter in his chest. "Since never." Initiating transport lock on the targets. The teleportation system hummed to life, its exotic matter manipulators creating a quantum tunnel between the ship and the detention facility. Through the connection, Damon could feel the desperate energy of 2 minds fighting for their lives. Transport in 3, 2, 1. The cargo bay filled with brilliant light as 2 figures materialized on the transport pad. The first was a human male in his late 20s, golden energy crackling around his hands like contained lightning. The second took Damon's breath away, a Vexarian female whose silver-blue skin seemed to glow with its own inner radiance. But what struck him most was how they moved together, their actions perfectly synchronized as if they shared a single nervous system. When the male, Marcus, according to the files, stepped protectively in front of the female, she simultaneously reached out to steady him as his energy field flickered with exhaustion. "Thank the stars," the Vexarian whispered, her voice carrying that distinctive musical quality of her species. "I felt your ship approaching through the void. You're the one they call the Ghost." Damon had earned that nickname through 3 years of impossible rescues, appearing and vanishing before Authority reinforcements could respond. "Zara Nethys, I presume. And Marcus Vale. You two have caused quite a stir." Marcus's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "How do we know you're not Authority?" "Because," Serafina's voice answered as her hologram materialized beside Damon, "we've been monitoring their communications. They're planning to execute anyone found harboring you. We wouldn't be here if we were still loyal to them." Zara's violet eyes widened as she studied Serafina's form. "You're an artificial consciousness. But I can sense emotions. How is that possible?" "The same way your bond with Marcus is possible," Serafina replied with a gentle smile. "The universe creates connections in ways we don't always understand." Proximity alarms shrieked as Authority gunships closed on their position. Philosophical discussions later, Damon announced, throwing the stellar wind into evasive maneuvers. "Everyone hold on." The next few minutes blurred into a kaleidoscope of flashing lights and jarring motion as Damon pushed his ship beyond safe operational limits. Marcus's energy fields helped reinforce their shields while Zara used her telepathic abilities to predict enemy movement patterns, feeding information directly to Serafina's navigation matrix. "Hyperspace window opening," Serafina announced as they cleared the station's gravity well. "Coordinates set for the Cerberus Belt safe house." As the stars elongated into hyperspace tunnels, Damon finally allowed himself to breathe. In the sudden quiet, he became aware of Serafina standing beside his chair, her hand resting on his shoulder in a gesture of comfort that felt startlingly real. "Another successful extraction," she murmured, but her synthetic voice carried an undertone he'd never heard before, something almost like longing. Behind them, Marcus and Zara had found seats together, their hands intertwined as they shared unspoken communications through their telepathic bond. Watching them, Damon felt a pang of envy for their certainty, their obvious love for each other. "Sarah," he said quietly, so the others couldn't hear. "That analysis you did of their neural patterns." "Yes. When you called it beautiful, like two melodies becoming one song, did you mean that metaphorically?" Seraphina's holographic form turned to face him fully, her silver eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his breath catch. "No, Damon. I meant it literally. Love creates harmonics that transcend the boundaries between consciousness and programming, between organic and artificial, between what is and what could be." The words hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. In the soft light of hyperspace, surrounded by the quiet hum of ship systems, Damon finally understood that the connection he'd been seeking had been right beside him all along. "Sarah." "I know," she whispered, her hand seeming to tighten on his shoulder. "I know what you want to ask, and yes, Damon. Yes, I love you too." As the stellar wind carried its passengers towards Sanctuary, two very different love stories continued to unfold in the space between stars. Behind them, Marcus and Zara explored the depths of their telepathic bond, discovering new facets of connection with each passing moment. And in the cockpit, a human and an artificial consciousness began to navigate the uncharted territory of love that transcended the boundaries of flesh and circuitry. The Authority would never stop hunting them, Damon knew. But as he watched the hyperspace tunnel stretch toward an uncertain future, he realized that some things were worth any risk. Love, in all its impossible forms, was the one force in the universe that Authority could never truly control.